Hello and welcome. I'm Sama Morningstar, and you may be listening to this video or audio in a number of places. You may be a participant in the Embodied Shakti Summit and looking at the donation page. You may be listening to the Womb Centered Healing podcast. And hearing this there, or seeing it in video on the YouTube version of that podcast. Or you may be listening to a future summit or event, because I have a feeling that we might be bringing this information forward more than just right now, as we're going to be talking today with Raquel. Thank you so much for joining us, Raquel Lemus, who is a licensed midwife and is running the research project about vaginal steaming for postpartum care that Kelly Garza of Steamy Chick and what's the name of the author of the fourth trimester?
Kimberly Johnson.
Kimberly Johnson and Kelly Garza have created this research project and put Raquel in charge of implementing it. And they've also created a fundraising campaign to fund the project, because it's hard to get funding for an effective treatment that women can do at home with their own kitchen tools and herbs that they can get at the grocery store or in their own gardens. Most medical research funding it's more financially what's the word for fun? What's that? Lucrative. It's more lucrative for drug companies to fund research about drugs that they can patent and sell, or treatments that they can, get a patent on, or get a, and so treatments like this that any woman can do for herself or have someone support her with aren't a big priority in our current medical system. And so we are doing it anyway. That makes me so happy. So I just want to encourage you listeners to listen in. Raquel is going to tell us all about this research project and how it's going. And please make a donation. You can look for the link here in the podcast. Look for the link on YouTube, or look for the link on the donation page of the summit to make a donation. If you're participating in the Embodied Shakti Summit, what you get if you make a donation to this is full lifetime access to the summit. If you make a donation of a certain amount and send me the receipt, then you'll get lifetime access to the summit materials, like you would if you made a donation to me. So this is included. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense, Raquel?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, absolutely.
So if you make a donation to this project, you will get lifetime access to the Embodied Shakti Summit, just to make that very clear. So Raquel, please tell us about this research project, how it started out, and how you got involved, and how it's going.
Yeah, thank you, Sama. So, I think this really came about from a desire of Kelly and Kimberly also being mothers. I'm not a mother, but I work with mothers as a licensed midwife, and I've been working with families since I was 16. The first, I feel like, legit job I ever had was a doula work. I didn't know that that's what they called it, but I was 16 helping this new mom who had a 10-day-old, a 2-year-old, a 5, and a 6-year-old.
Wow.
I was there supporting her in that day. 16 years old, me doing this already, doing this type of work of supporting this mother.
Wow.
In helping her be the best person that she could be to raise her family, right? And with Kelly and Kimberly, they both have very unique experiences within their postpartum period and have seen the need and the desire for more support. Right now in the U.S., most people, the majority of people in the U.S. are still giving birth in hospitals. there are a growing number of people giving birth in birth centers and home birth. But in hospitals, if you're giving birth in a hospital, then in the postpartum, you have one visit after you've given birth. One visit after you've given birth. And that happens at 6 weeks postpartum, right? So if anything is developing or showing signs of distress, which sometimes people don't even know, they have to go into an emergency room, or getting an appointment is really challenging. So it's a really critical time to not be seeing someone that has some inkling of what's going on within the postpartum period, of what's normal, of how to support the body in general. And the World Health Organization recommends at least 3 visits by a knowledgeable care provider. So
during that first 6 weeks, 3 visits.
Yes, at least 3 visits.
Oh my goodness.
At least 3 visits. Yeah. In typical midwifery care, mostly if you're having birth at a birth center or at home, you're going to receive anywhere from 4 to 6 postpartum visits.
Thank goodness.
Throughout your postpartum time, throughout that first 6 weeks. So it's really kind of this drastic switch. 1 visit, 6 visits, what's going on in between? 3, is that a happy medium? We don't know. And so we really wanted to look at, okay, can vaginal steaming, or what from the case studies we've seen, we've had moms steam. Kelly has steamed herself in the postpartum. I've worked with several moms who have steamed in their postpartum period, and their case reports of how they felt the improvements in healing their uterus and blood loss and just coming back into their own bodies and feeling of support, less depression. All those things have been word of mouth and case studies, which, as our society has shown, we don't always take women's word for it. We need research. And so this is where the research study came about, and being like, okay, can we actually put some data to what we know is benefiting people and is showing just lots of care and improvement for this postpartum period, and helping this transitional time for mothers or pregnant people after they've given birth. And that's how the study came about. I've been working with Kelly off and on. We've both kind of been on our own journeys side by side and have always kept in touch. And after I finished midwifery school and came back to LA, because I studied in El Paso, Texas at Maternidad La Luz, there's a birth center out there. But after I came back and really tuned into what she was doing here, I took her course, and we connected, and she was like, hey, would you want to support me in helping with the consultations that happen at Steamy Chick as a licensed midwife, as having this other knowledge around the uterus? Can you support me with this? And then that's where I started talking to her a lot about the postpartum and my experiences with working with women, and my experience with steaming with women and with pregnant people in the postpartum period. And, when this study came about, that's when Kelly and Kimberly approached me to be lead on it in LA. So that's how it started.
All right. And so being lead on it in LA, that hints at possible other partners in the research project in other areas. Is
that's our,
or is it possible?
That's our hope, and that's our, holding that highest vision and expansion for what this study really is. It's a small study. It's a pilot study. Right now, we have about 15 participants actively in the study. I'm still definitely recruiting some more in the postpartum period. So if you're, giving birth from now until mid-April and you're in LA, reach out to me, and we'll give you the information to do that in a little bit. But yeah, as a small pilot study, we're looking at like as piquing interest. Like, can we pique the interest of people to make this a larger study, maybe expand it to different areas? Kelly and Kimberly are both in communication with different people about research and about really supporting this to grow. So yeah.
So explain how it works. And why it needs to be in the LA area, because what is it that happens when somebody says, yes, I'm about to give birth, or I've just given birth and I want to be part of this research project? How does it work? What do they have to do? Do they meet with you? Do you instruct them on certain things? Do they fill out some form? What is it? Give us the practical nitty-gritty.
Yes, the logistics. So why it has to be in LA is because I'm the one doing all the visits right now. Yes, and that's where I live.
So it involves visits by a licensed midwife, or at least that part to your home. Okay.
So the visits start, like, I try to recruit people. Most of the people have come into the study when they were already pregnant. There have been a couple that within the day or two after giving birth, they've reached out, because our first visit initially needs to happen on day 4 postpartum. And again, we're doing this because on day 4 is really when we have an idea that there's been a decrease in the blood flow and the lochia that's happening after postpartum, and we want to make sure that that's starting to heal in a good way, right? Steaming has the potential of increasing circulation. So if somebody has been having some issues with hemorrhaging and things like that, then steaming at that time would not be the most beneficial thing for them. Rest would be more appropriate. So, and we are talking about vaginal birth. So for this study in particular, we are looking at people who have given birth vaginally. Not to say that you can't steam after having a C-section, but the wait time after having a C-section to steam is longer. So, we're targeting right now healthy vaginal births, regardless of whether or not you've had interventions, regardless of whether or not you've had sutures. Those actually help to really see the benefits of steaming in that time. But we want to make sure that your bleeding is starting to come down. So that's why we start on day 4. That being said, the visit has to happen on day 4 postpartum. So that is me coordinating with the family to come out and visit you at whatever time would feel appropriate. And then we do have 2 different study groups that are going on. We have people who are steaming consistently in the early part of their postpartum period. So they would receive a steam from day 4 to day 8. And then we have people who are steaming, more of a control group, who are steaming at 6 weeks. So for the people who are steaming consistently, or what I should say first is everybody gets at least 3 visits. And those visits happen on day 4 postpartum, day 8 postpartum, and at 6 weeks postpartum. And on each of those visits, you're getting a full examination of your overall health and healing. So I'm looking at blood pressure. I'm taking measurements of the waist. I'm assessing any tears that might have happened. I'm looking at the health and the tissue integrity of the vagina. I'm looking at assessing breast pain, constipation. How's it going with bladder movements and bowel movements and things like that. So you're getting a full review of your physical well-being, and an emotional assessment too of how is this transition going for you. What areas are working? Where is it finding more challenge? Are you having some challenges with breastfeeding? Are there simple questions that I can help answer in that time frame? And then for those who are steaming in the early part of the period, then they're, in addition to that wellness check, emotional and physical wellness check, then they receive a 15-minute steam. And
so you do the steam?
Yes.
You
So
conduct
yes,
the steam with them. You don't.
yeah. So I steam with them again because it's a study. So we
Mhm.
want to make sure that everything is as streamlined as possible, right? Our system in the United States likes things streamlined. It makes it easy to follow. In research studies, we need to be able to say we use 3.5 cups or 2.5 cups of liquid every single time. We used 3 tablespoons of herbs every single time. And so in steaming, it is a process that can be very autonomous, and can be totally done on your own and with some lighter support than what I'm offering at this time. But because of this research structure, we're trying to make it as easy also to copy, because we want more people to be able to
Sure.
study the benefits in other places as well. So so I'm the one coming every single day for those 5 days to steam you.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're just checking in, and throughout that 15-minute steam, and then at day 8 I do again that full visit of the body and the assessment of what's happening. And then at 6 weeks, again, just a revisiting of the body, revisiting of the wellness, making sure that the body is healing in the way that that is most optimal and most nourishing in this postpartum period. Yeah.
But so you're the study for these early steaming participants, they're
Hmm.
also receiving 5 visits from
Yes.
someone. So that's to be taken into consideration as well. I mean, for future studies, it sounds to me like that could be controlled for, so that we could really, because there could be aspects of the emotional well-being or even the physical well-being, for example, that we could, a critic might say, well, do one where they're not steaming, they're just having a midwife visit 5 days in a row.
Exactly. Yeah.
And control for that, and then like that. So, but the control group that you do have in place right now is that you come and visit, you visit the person. They don't get the steaming visits in the early period, but only after 6 weeks. And then do you do steaming with them for 5 days
Yes.
after
And
the
then
6
we've
weeks?
seen them once. So
Once.
that's also the difference. Yes.
Oh, okay.
They can continue the practice. I show them how they can continue the practice themselves. But as far as the research study goes, I steam them once at 6 weeks.
Okay, because that addresses sort of the ethical thing of, like, if we kind of have a strong feeling that steaming is helping people based on your experience with clients, then how can you ethically withhold that from
Yes.
a group of people when it's very likely that it would be beneficial to them? So you're not withholding it from them 100%. You're just saying, why don't you wait to start until 6 weeks out? You'll still get the benefits then, but that gives us the opportunity to see the difference. And so do you still go for those 2 visits with the control group? Do you still go for 2 visits within the 6 weeks?
Yeah. So everybody gets a visit regardless of what group you're in on day 4, day 8, and 6 weeks. And yeah, that, like you said, that's something that's really hard for me. I want to steam everybody. I want to steam everybody. And I can't in the way that I want to right now.
Right.
Because we are trying to look at this as data and really get the support for it. But I'm definitely having those conversations with people, and in the 6 weeks guiding them through how to do this themselves, and the support that they need in order to continue the practice and still get a lot of that healing from the steaming. Even at 6 weeks, it's still incredibly beneficial.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm a massage therapist, and I work with women all the time who are way beyond 6 weeks. Even their children are grown and gone, and they're still suffering from health issues that I link to inadequate postpartum care. And I send them, I say, go and have your 40-day confinement now with your adult grown child. I want to go do that with my mom someday, and and steam and do the body wrapping and all the wonderful things that we know how to do now, or that we're remembering how to do from all the traditions that haven't been lost, or that we're resurrecting, of how to care for ourselves postpartum. So we can do it retroactively. So if we can do it that far retroactively, then 6 weeks we can certainly do it then.
Yeah.
But you're still giving that postpartum visit and talking with them and reassuring them, so they are getting some of the emotional support.
Absolutely.
Even
and that is something that is challenging to controlful, because it feels so basic to just say that, like, we need support. We need support in this period of time, and I think it's ridiculous that it's not present on a wide scale.
I suppose you could do sort of a control group just simply by going and asking to do an evaluation, seeing if you can get some volunteers who are just in this other system of, they just go for their one doctor's appointment after 6 weeks, and you make it available at a certain doctor's office or at a birth center where that's the only care women are getting, and say, we just want to evaluate this baseline where they haven't received a midwifery visit in the first 6 weeks. They're not receiving any steaming, and you just go and you evaluate their health, and maybe then you introduce steaming to them. But then that would be an even more severe control, even though the inclination would be to go to that and say, hey, be part of this group and come in and steam right away.
Right. Yeah, there's lots of ways of envisioning it, and lots of ways to rule out those factors and think of, like, what, there's also, I guess you can say, I would say with this study, we have some, what do they say, inspector bias, because I do have that bias in that I know that it works. So getting somebody who doesn't have that support and maybe is a little bit more skeptical too, of this process, would also be beneficial, in that.
But then you'd have to get them to agree. And my experience is people who are skeptical about vaginal steaming don't want to have anything to do with it at all.
Right. We have to find that person who's like, I'm going to prove you wrong, and then being like, haha,
there we go. All right. Well, so there's a lot of different aspects, and it kind of makes sense why, another reason why this research hasn't happened up until now is because the people who know its effectiveness are just doing it and teaching people how to do it. They're not trying to go and prove it. But then so I really appreciate this visionary impulse with Kelly and Kimberly and yourself to say, you know what, we need to bridge the gap between the medical community and this wisdom that's been carried on throughout the last few generations, despite the persecution of the midwives and the people that have been, that have these traditions still intact, the genocide and all of this that has gone on, that's sent these practices into hiding, that we still just know, those of us who are open to that kind of knowing, we know in our wombs really that this is beneficial, and that our job is simply to educate. But this kind of research is going to help us to educate people who have more confidence in the intellectual type of knowing, the scientific type of knowing, than they do in the intuitive, more feminine type of knowing. So we're building bridges with this research between those two types of knowing, which is so important, as I'm sure you know in your midwifery practice, to help women to go from thinking they know everything about childbirth and what's going to happen, reading all the books and and getting the trainings, and to connect with their intuitive knowing that their body can do this and give birth. And I know as a doula, and perhaps you as well, we have to sort of coach women to reconnect with that that intuitive wisdom and trust in that more. And so I really see this research project as supportive of that. We're saying, look, the research even proves it, that you can really trust this, knowing that, oh, this feels so good, and so it must be good, right?
Yes, I think you expressed that beautifully. Like it is a bridging, and you're right, in the traditions in which this knowledge has never been separated. Specifically, I'm thinking of the Korean cultures mostly, and the Haitian women. They have a very active practice of steaming regularly throughout the various phases of their menstrual cycle and uterine health, womb health in general. And that is because they've carried it on and they know it. It is a very intuitive process for them. And those of us who have been disconnected from that knowledge sometimes need this. We need those bridges to help us link back to these practices that can be very intuitive once we start to allow that knowledge to come through. And yeah, the research is proving it in the numbers of like noticing how much a difference in like I'm taking waist measurements, for example, between the two different groups, and noticing that the ones who are steaming earlier are seeing a decrease in their waist. And not to be like, oh yes, it's about size, but what that's showing to me is that it's clearing. You're clearing the uterus more effectively. The uterus is going down in size more effectively, going back to the space where it lives. And you're releasing fluids more effectively. Like that's one of the things that the research is already starting to show.
Yeah, and you're toning all of the tissues, not just the uterus. You're toning all of the abdominal tissues with that steaming practice, and everything is saying, oh, okay, getting the nourishment and the support and the relaxation and the feel-good feelings, which helps all of the tissues and organs to function at their optimum functioning and come back into a healthy balance. And not that it was an unhealthy balance, but birth is very intense and opens things up to a state of being that it needs to return to a non-pregnant state of being, and that the steaming is showing, the research already is showing that the steaming is facilitating that very effectively, that return to a non-pregnant state for all of the tissues, and probably even the bones, the ligaments, all of that is getting toned.
Yes, the ligaments, all of it is exactly, it's getting toned. And you're right, it's not necessarily that in the postpartum it's an unhealthy balance, but what happens is that people never get back into a healthy balance. They never heal completely because they don't have the space to or the support to. And then that's where down the line, like you spoke about earlier, you're seeing people who are dealing with conditions that can be linked in some way or another back to their birth and their postpartum healing experience.
Exactly.
And that's really what we're looking at steaming to support, is that recovery time to help the body do what it wants to do and come back into its optimal alignment.
Yeah, and so some of the things that I see down the line in women whose children have grown and left the home already, is that their ligaments that hold our hips, which is the central fulcrum for all of our movements, that get totally stretched out, deliberately so, to allow the baby to pass. They don't get toned back up all the way because women aren't resting after, if we just stayed in bed, right? But even that isn't quite all the way enough, because those ligaments need encouragement. I mean, when you injure your ligaments, or you tear a tendon, or you overstretch a ligament, a lot of overzealous yoga practitioners who are going for the flexibility end up later on in life having this similar issue where we overstretch the ligaments. We haven't really relaxed the muscles. So oftentimes, if there was stress during the birth for some reason, there may be a lot of muscle tension, which can prevent the ligaments from actually toning back up again, because then every time you move, the muscle's tight, it's not lengthening and allowing you to move freely, it's pulling on the ligaments some more. Also, loose ligaments can cause chronic muscle tension, because in order to stabilize the joints to even be able to move around properly and keep the spine from falling off the sacrum, for example, and cutting off nerve flow to the legs, and you know, the body tenses up the muscles to compensate for the loose ligaments. So so this results in the long term and even short term in you know, low back pain, sacroiliac joint pain, you know, hip pain, leg pain, all kinds of, you know, structural issues that women suffer from, and no one makes the connection. And so there's all these wonderful practices that we're remembering and learning from certain, you know, especially certain indigenous cultures in Mexico, the rebozo, the bone binding practices, the hip binding practices, the belly wrapping practices of giving the body the message that to come back together, right?
Yes.
And the steaming has that toning quality. And as while at the same time it lets the muscles relax. It's a warmth, and the muscles can relax, which then allows the natural springiness of the ligaments to activate. And I'm just intuitively sharing about this. I'm a massage therapist, and
it's right on. You're spot on. That's why I'm like, I love it.
Yeah, I feel how the body works. And there hasn't been a whole lot of research about this type of stuff either, except all these years I've been massaging people's bodies and feeling what's going on under my hands. So the elasticity of the tissues needs to return, and steaming helps that elasticity. I can feel it when I steam. You can feel it when you steam, that suddenly the tissues, the vaginal tissues, are more elastic. It stimulates circulation, so any tearing or overstretchedness in the actual birth canal, the cervix, the womb itself, all of that gains more elasticity and tone. So another thing that women commonly have is prolapse of the organs, because the core musculature has tension patterns, or has lost its elasticity, lost its strength because of injury or trauma from birth, or even just being all stretched out and not being pulled back together, and the pelvic floor and all that, and so the organs kind of fall out, right? So there's a whole process of encouraging the organs to all come back into their proper place, because without that, then we're all kind of just falling out, right, of ourselves.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing, is also just like the report of women and visually, and you know, I do at the 6 weeks exam for everybody, I am doing a speculum exam as well, to look at their cervix and to just feel the integrity of the muscular structures within the uterus, within the vaginal walls. And all of what you're saying is spot on about that. Is this, you know, most of these women feel like, and also the ability of them to even look at themselves again. You know, it's generally easier when you have somebody who's supporting you through that. The steaming helps because you feel that connection. You feel that there's more awareness again of your genitals, as opposed to being like, I just had this baby through me, and then how the heck am I ever going to reconnect to my sensuality and my sexuality? With the steaming, because you have that stimulation, it facilitates that process with greater ease. Not to say that you're going to be 100% ready to have sex immediately after the 6 weeks, but there's less discomfort, there's less fear, there's less tenderness in the external genitalia, and internally as well. Same thing with the uterus. We're seeing that, I'm noticing that people are having really, one thing we don't talk about is after birth, your uterus continues to contract. So you continue to experience some form of contraction. Most of the time that happens while breastfeeding is occurring. because of the response systems that are going on with feeding a baby and your body coming back to, your uterus coming back to its normal size. But those are the women who are steaming are really seeing an impact in the comfort with the contractions, like not feeling them at all after birth. And that is especially true for second time moms. And I have theories around that in that I think a lot of people aren't getting an initial clearing the first time they get pregnant. And so they're having these other micro issues or an old residue build up over the years. And by the second time they get pregnant, their uteruses have to work harder to clear everything out again as an opportunity, right? Because it's an opportunity to clear out the uterus effectively after birth. Right. And so their contractions are so much more intense because they're dealing with the stuff that never got healed in the first pregnancy.
So and normally, yeah, I want to ask a little bit to clarify more about that. So normally a woman has her first birth, and without this kind of postpartum support, her womb might contract some when she's breastfeeding naturally, and that contracting throughout the months after her birth. It's not just that initial lochia that comes out. Right. There might still be some residue from the pregnancy, some tissue from the pregnancy in there, even if the doctor went in and scooped it all out after the birth. I know that that's a common practice. There may still be some residue, and that throughout the months after that, even through breastfeeding, there might be contractions going on, but the first birth is not as much. But you're contracting, and that gets the uterus back to the right size. Yeah. And also might help with when you start menstruating again, which you might not even start to do. For many women don't start menstruating yet again while they're breastfeeding until some months later. And especially, and so, but then when you do, you could have issues around menstruation being more difficult if you still have residue from the pregnancy that hasn't come out yet. So the steaming helps that residue to come out so that it's not still in there in your next pregnancy, where then the womb has to work twice as hard to eliminate and to come back down to the right size, because now there's double of the residue in there that didn't come out. Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say double exactly, but there's remnants.
Yes.
There's remnants of the fact that whatever healing took place during the first pregnancy was probably not as efficient or as restful or as supportive as it could be, or as it ideally would be. In that time. And again, yes, it's the clearing that's happening. It's also, like you were talking about, the tonification, right? If you didn't have a uterus that toned and didn't have ligaments that were supported in that toning during your first pregnancy, that's only going to be more challenging the second time around to come back and do it all over again.
Especially because now you've been raising a baby.
Yeah.
And doing all this work and you know.
Yeah, and I hear you get more sleep after you have a baby, right?
No. And that's when our tissues is when we're sleeping, right? That's when we're naturally, our tissues remedy and tone. And so we're getting less sleep, we're getting more work. We're not getting that good postpartum, everybody taking care of us luxuriously so we don't have to lift a finger. And so we're having to get up and move around and all this. And then the next baby comes and the body's already tired and has to work extra hard because things didn't get completed in that healing process. So beautiful. So I can see a whole bunch of further research to sort of show what we already suspect to be true, to communicate this in a language to the scientific and medical community, the importance of this and the effectiveness of steaming by, looking at, births later on, like steaming with someone right after this birth, and then how the difference between the one who steamed after the first birth and then had a second birth and her experience, and the difference between that and somebody who didn't steam on the first birth, and then what happens in the second birth. All of these theories could be that's a lot of work. You got your work cut out for you. And so, but I have one other question before I want to ask about the future, more of how you're envisioning how this project will grow. Do you have specific herbal formulas that you use that you give to women? Is there one formula, or are there a couple of formulas?
So for the study specifically, we are using the Steamy Chick cleansing herb formula.
Okay.
So that is, I feel like, one of the most effective formulas, again, to cleanse, to help tonify. It also has a good amount of disinfecting herbs for anybody who's dealing with sutures and the healing of those sutures. So that is, when you're steaming in the postpartum, you are looking at wanting to have that nourishment, that combination of nourishing herbs, tonification, and disinfection, to just help, and cleansing, to cleanse out the uterus, help nourish it, and really support the process. So for the study, we are specifically using the cleansing herbs, again, to make it as concrete as possible that these are the specific herbs that we're using. And that this can vary depending on region, depending on what ancestral plants you have around, depending on where you are in this world. Our combination of herbs isn't like just the one combination of herbs that can be used. A lot of different herbs around the world and around the globe have different cleansing properties or tonification properties or nourishing properties. And the ones that are around you are going to be the most relevant for you. But,
that sounds like a whole other branch of the research project, if you wanted to, really go down that road, or some herbally oriented midwife or doula or someone who wants to participate in the study, in the ongoing study, take that off, a branch off of that, and go around the world and say, what do we have locally growing? Does that work better than something we order from way over there? Or, all those questions. And
I think it just speaks to the beauty of how individual but universal this practice can be. And that's really phenomenal. Like, this is, individual health. And this is and how you can design it for you to meet your needs with where you are, and with the specific needs and goals of your body. And that's incredible to me.
Yeah. And I mean, there's something to be said too about if you have a plant or a number of plants growing in a wild in a field, or in your garden growing, that you've cultivated, that you can develop a relationship with the living plant. There's another quality to that. I did that. I harvested wild nettles and did a steam when I was traveling in the UK, and that was one of the most potent steams. I just remember thinking, wow, this one was really powerful, just with wild nettles, nothing else. Wild nettles growing. And so that's one thing that I talk with my steam clients and womb-centered healing clients in general, steaming or no, about is with herbalism is, what do you have growing near you? And so,
it sounds like another podcast.
Yes, I've done them.
If you haven't already.
Yes, there's many podcasts in the lineup for sure. But I do love, the way that Kelly has designed these herbal formulas to take some of the most potent herbs that are known to have these qualities that you listed that are important in the healing process. So it's also very helpful sometimes to just have a formula that that an expert has designed, that's going to give you the results that you need, and then experiment from there with locally, so awesome. So awesome. So we talked before we started a little bit about how this is a pilot study. and that it would be something to inspire further studies. And I've been hinting at ideas that I see for further studies here. But right now, what you're looking for to grow where it is right now, it sounds like you're looking for more participants in the Los Angeles area. If there was somebody who wanted to assist the research project itself to get going in a different area, say another midwife or doula or womb-centered healing professional, maybe even a vaginal steam facilitator who wanted to, or postpartum doula, wanted to participate in the study as a researcher, could they reach out to you as well and discuss the possibilities? And what do you see those possibilities being in the future?
Yeah, I think in the future it is getting a broader basis, maybe across various different places in the US or in other parts of the world. I know that people have been reaching out to Kelly and Kimberly both, actively definitely wanting to be leading some of this research in their areas as well. So with that, part of it is funding, is looking at as the funding. And the more funding we have, the more capacity, and even trying to get creative with our resources, in order to be able to expand that research for across different settings. I think also in the future, I feel like that's what it is just refining this study to make it even better, to look at the variables that are present, to how we can kind of streamline this if we're thinking of our system likes to work, and how do you implement this as a structure? How do you implement this as a wide whole? And so that's where some of streamlining some of these practices to make them more accessible for people who don't normally have access to this information, or would not typically seek it out because they just, sometimes we don't know what we don't know, or what we've been disconnected from. So I think in the streamlining of the practice as well, and having knowledgeable providers to teach or to go out and do these visits with people in this, to be these bridges between what we've been disconnected to how this practice can support our health and wellness, I think is going to be really, really important in making this a profession for folks, maybe even beyond just midwifery, of what is possible, and how you can support a family at this time, and things to kind of, in that time, it's sensitive, so you want to look out for like what is happening, making sure that there's no contraindications that are being activated, things like that, that the streamlining of knowledgeable, ethical care providers in any field, I think is going to be really important. And I think that's also part of the aspect of like the research that that will help.
Yeah, and create and building more bridges between more medically inclined practitioners and providers, and then the more doula, midwifery inclined providers, bridging the gaps between those different standards of care.
Yes.
And creating healthy partnerships between those different approaches to care, and infusing the medical providers with the wisdom of the midwifery, as well as gaining access to some of the life-saving sometimes
Absolutely.
skills and services that the medical providers have to offer.
Absolutely. And I can already say within, within that practice that there was, one participant that was showing signs that were, a little bit outside of the normal range. And this practice, and even myself as a midwife, it's definitely not to be like, don't ever go to your medical provider or stop doing that work, but it is about collaboration. How can we use these systems to really support the individual unit in their whole? And for this one participant, having a knowledgeable care provider see her on a day where she would have normally never had a visit,
Mm-hmm.
but to be like, hey, this is something that you should go get checked out by your care provider. Like, this is an important aspect, and go get checked out. And was able to support her in getting a condition checked out that, if left unchecked, who knows
Beautiful.
what could have manifested or further progressed, and was able to like get the best of holistic care in that moment.
So that was one participant. In how many participants do you say you have right now? 25?
I wish. No, we have about 15.
Okay, so if 1 in 15 women is having a medically important symptom going unnoticed within that 6 weeks after postpartum, which we don't know if that's an accurate statistic, but we do know that in your research, and I imagine you have other experience of that you could document from your midwifery practice, of 1 in how many women have something within those 6 weeks that need medical attention that would go unnoticed because she doesn't know, she doesn't have the information, she just thinks it's not normal, whatever's going on, or thinks it's unrelated and thinks it's about something else and wouldn't go see a doctor about that anyway. But having a midwife there saying, wait a second, you need to get a test done, you need to get this looked at, because it could be something bigger than it seems. If 1 in 15 women, I bet the numbers are higher than that.
I do believe the numbers are higher, especially because there are larger numbers of morbidity and mortality rates in the postpartum period in the United States. And that's kind of one of our biggest issues here, especially if you're a woman of color. Those numbers are even higher for you specifically. So yeah, we have people dealing with infections. We have people dealing with all things that they don't get seen or get kind of brushed off, or they don't know how to address in this time frame, that really could use the support of just having some more experience looking at these things, an efficient care provider. That just knows some of the red flags. Not even, we're not trying to get a whole bunch of people to diagnose people here. We're just trying to have that support to be like, hey, this is a red flag. Like, this is a time where you would want to activate that medical care.
And so the hope in that with Kelly Garza and Kimberly, as far as I understand, and from what you're saying, is that we can train, especially through the Steamy Chick School Institute, we can train more practitioners in postpartum care from this angle of steaming, vaginal steaming, and train practitioners to have a list of things to look for, red flags, to then say to women, oh, you need to go to the doctor and get this checked out. And so, and I imagine we can invite trained postpartum doulas into this aspect of the vaginal steaming, to include vaginal steaming. We can invite midwives into this aspect. We can invite, nurses, maternity nurses into this vaginal steaming training, to not just to say to do vaginal steaming, but to just be paying attention and have some tools that we can offer the vaginal steaming, but also just to pay attention to what's going on in more detail for women postpartum. Beautiful. And so we are kind of in this research testing that too. What would it be like if we actually paid attention to women postpartum and asked them a bunch of questions and looked into their health and really supported the health of women postpartum.
And
Because
believe them.
and believe
Believe
them.
them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's I think the statistic for I think women of color is like 1 in 3% that are dealing with these health issues that are being unseen and that are dealing with death. You know,
Wait,
that's
so
a,
one in 3 women are dying postpartum. So that's actually 33%, I believe. If 3 women is 100% and 1 in 3 women, that's 1/3 of the women. That's 33%
of
women of color.
Specifically Black women.
Black women are dying postpartum. So that doesn't even, and I bet that the mortality rates for mothers in childbirth, for Black women in childbirth, are somewhere around there too, I believe. Same number?
Around there, yes.
Yeah.
There's it's 3 times more likely. That's what it is. 3 times more likely. I'm looking at it.
Oh, okay. The statistics. You
have it. Okay. Look at it right now to be more accurate if I'm quoting these things, you know?
Right. Yeah. So 3 times more likely. And where are you looking to find out that information?
This is one of the alarming. Let's see. This is the NCIBI. They're one of the large research groups. Here's the CDC. Also, and
they're saying
NPR. And NPR is one of the ones up here too.
Okay, and they're all saying that it's 3 Black women particularly are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth or during the postpartum period.
Yes. Oh, and oh my gosh, this one's even more so. This is the NCIB, which is one of the national what do they stand for? They stand for National Library of Medicine, National Institute of Health, and they are quoting 2 to 6 times more likely to die of complications of pregnancy in the postpartum. So it's an absurd number of women dying, but specifically, unfortunately, Black women and women of color, these rates are higher for various reasons.
And from what I've read and listened to and researched, a lot of it is from what you said, women saying, this is going on for me, and being blown off by their providers saying, oh, that's normal, or just not even listening to them, not being able to get an appointment in a timely manner. And, you know, I mean, there was even, I think, a man who there's a video out that I've seen lately of a man whose wife died and who's now involved politically to step up and work towards remedying the situation where his wife was, you know, trying to get care from her providers and they were ignoring her, and their efforts at advocating for themselves fell short, and she ended up dying. And so the more providers that we have that have this information, that, you know, that are primed to, that are either women or people of color themselves, or have done the work to clear the institutionalized and internalized and almost invisible racism, but that is very effectively influencing their work and their listening ear and their ability to attend to people, or their understanding of people of color. The more people that we can educate in this direction to address that is so important. So I'm just so grateful for your work and your dedication. I know it's probably a lot of work, but that you're dedicated to doing it on top of your midwifery practice, which is a lot of work all on its own. I just want to commend you, and I want to encourage listeners to please reach out. So your email, if people want to be involved in this in any capacity, whether it's by becoming a research subject or by becoming possibly a researcher or assistant of some kind, involved in that capacity, or by giving a donation. Your email is Raquel@steamychick.com. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's RAQUEL at steamychick.com.
Okay, beautiful. And so I will also attempt to post the direct link to make donations to this project. And those donations, what will they go towards funding in the project?
They will go towards supplies and time, like the time it takes to pay researchers, me, other assistants, to go out and recruit and compile all the data, to make the home visits, to do all these aspects of analyzing the data and recruitment and all of the one-on-one time that you're having with all of the participants. Participants don't have to pay for anything. There's absolutely no cost to them. So it also allows for that ability to keep it a free service right now, which is not typical to receive this much care. So yeah.
Beautiful. So we're funding not only research, but actually high quality postpartum care for participants in the study that might not have access to it otherwise. So wonderful way of making a contribution to this change, which is fundamental for our society pulling out of this self-destructive nosedive that we're in right now. I mean, it just, how we got the idea that completely disregarding how we come into this world, how we're born, and actually abusing that process, that would be a good idea. How we got that idea is beyond me sometimes. I have theories, but we won't go into that now. But the fact is, we're in dire straits as a species because of that. And I feel very strongly that we all need to contribute in whatever small or big way that we can. And I feel so grateful to you, Raquel, that you're stepping into this. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that you can give a little bit or a lot to this project and support Raquel, because I imagine as you get more donations, you'll have more time available and more resources available to serve more women in this way, and to grow this research project so that it has more and more impact. Show the results. If you show the results for 15 women, it's not going to have as much impact as if you showed the results for several thousand women.
Right.
Over a long-term process too. Like if we had more donations and more resources, then that's what's going to allow for these extensions of the research, where you're going back to those same women in their second birth and seeing what the results are, having had steaming and after their first birth, and going back to the women in a longitudinal study where we're checking in with them later as they're older and comparing them with women that didn't have this care, and all the different health issues that might have been alleviated, which is another theory in Kimberly's book, or even based on experience of working with women over the long term, that having adequate postpartum care, we can set ourselves up to not have the kinds of chronic illnesses that women typically have, and that we're linking these types of chronic illnesses like autoimmune disease, chronic structural things like low back pain and sciatic pain and all that, and there's a whole host of ailments that affect women more than men that we're linking now to inadequate postpartum care, and that postpartum time, the healing that goes on there, can actually heal us in advance of these diseases or illnesses or ailments from later on. So the more we give to this kind of research, the more that we can present this to the people who are skeptical or who say, oh, you don't have anything scientific to back that up. We can say, yes, we do. So
Exactly.
yes, we do. So let's
Yes.
make it happen, folks. I'm so excited
Thank
that
you.
I got to interview you here today, Raquel. So thank you so much. And look for the links. I'll post the link to make a direct donation in whatever platform this is in. Some might be easier to access than others. I know YouTube doesn't like you having links that go outside of YouTube, so you might not, but you can copy and paste it from the description. Sometimes that's hard to find, but look for it if you're watching in YouTube. Look for it in the Anchor platform. Again, Anchor doesn't allow links that go outside of Anchor, so you have to copy and paste it from the description. But if you're coming in the summit, on the donation page, you should be able to click the link right there above the video and go directly to the donation page. So thank you so much, Raquel.
Thank you, Emma. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you to everybody who is motivated or moved by this research study and who gives. It's such an honor to have your support and to be doing this as a community. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Okay, folks, click on that link and give to the research. Let's help birth become this miraculous, and mothers become the miraculous beings that we're designed to be through luxurious, wonderful postpartum care. All right, that's all for now. Until next time.